Hello, 5B, and welcome to the next chapter of Joseph's story. When we last left Joseph, he had just had his bar mitzvah out at sea, and he feels like he needs to be a responsible adult now. But he did find those little girls misbehaving, and he was sort of like, I don't know what to do. Do I tell on them? Do I stop them? Do I participate? Joseph, somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean, 1939, 10 days from home. Joseph followed the small group of kids through the raised doorway onto the bridge of the St. Louis. The bridge was a narrow, curving room that stretched from one side of the ship to the other. Bright sunlight streamed in through the 24 windows, offering a panoramic view of the vast blue-green Atlantic and wispy white clouds. Throughout the wood-decked room were metal benches with maps and rulers on them, and the walls were dotted with mysterious gauges and meters made out of shining brass. There were a number of crewmen on the bridge, some of them wearing blue and white sailor uniforms, and 3 more in brass-buttoned blue jackets with gold bands at the cuffs, and blue officers' caps with gold trim. One of the regular sailors stood at a spoked steering wheel the size of a truck tire with handles sticking all around it. It looked like the steering wheels Joseph had seen in paintings of pirate ships, but this one was metal and connected to a big pedestal. The shortest of the 3 men in fancy uniforms strode over to the group with a big smile on his face. Joseph recognized him. "Welcome to the bridge, boys and girls," he said. "I'm Captain Schroeder." The captain shook all of their hands, even though none of them was older than 13. One of the parents on board the ship had arranged for a tour of the bridge and engine room for any children who wanted to attend it, and 8 of them had signed up. Ruthie and Evelyn hadn't been interested, but Renata was there along with a few of the other older kids. Captain Schroeder introduced them to his first officer and the other crew on the bridge, and showed them what some of the gauges and dials meant. Joseph listened eagerly. This is the engine control for the St. Louis," Captain Schroeder explained. "When we want to change speed, we grip these handles, slide them all the way forward, and then pull them back to the new speed we want. I'm not going to change the speed now because we've got the engines set right where we want them." Joseph noticed that both handles were set to a head full. That's like the maximum speed. "Are we going full speed because we're racing 2 other ships to Cuba?" Joseph asked. The captain looked surprised and then angry. "Where did you hear that we were racing other ships to Cuba?" he asked Joseph. "I heard 2 stewards talking about it the other day," Joseph said, feeling a little nervous. "They said if we don't make it there first, they might not let us in." The captain pursed his lip and glanced meaningfully at his first officer, who looked a little concerned. The captain turned on his smile again. "Oh, we're not in any kind of a race," he said, looking from Joseph to the other kids. "We're just making the best possible speed because we have calm seas. You've got nothing to worry about. Now, perhaps Petty Officer Jocko will show you the engine room." As high up as the bridge was on the ship, the engine room was just as far down. After stepping through a steel fire door that had "Crew Only" painted on it in big letters, Joseph and the tour group went down staircase after staircase after staircase, and they still weren't to the engine room yet. Below deck was very different from what Joseph was used to above the decks, where everything on the A, B, and C decks was airy and comfortable. There were no windows here, no portholes, no spacious cabins. The air was damp and smelled of cabbage and sweat. Peeking into the rooms, Joseph could see that the crew quarters below decks had 2 beds to a room and barely enough space to turn around. The hallways were narrow and the ceilings were low. Petty Officer Jocko had to duck as they went through the doorways. Joseph had never been afraid of tight places before, but the close living conditions made him uneasy. He felt like he was visiting an alien world. The 7 other kids must have felt the same way because they were all silent, even Renata. From down the hall, though, came the sound of men singing, and Petty Officer Jocko slowed. As they got closer, Joseph recognized the tune. It was the Horst-Wessel song, the anthem of the Nazi Party. Joseph's skin crawled, and he and the other kids looked at each other nervously. Joseph had heard the Horst Wessel song hundreds of times in the weeks after his father's abduction. It had gone overnight from a song sang at rallies to the unofficial national anthem of Germany, and it was frightening. The last time Joseph had heard the song, it was the day every one of his neighbors had lined the street and been forced to salute the soldiers of the Nazis as they marched by. Petty Officer Jockle tried to slip the children past the little room where the crewmen were singing, but suddenly someone in the room called out, "Stop! Passengers aren't allowed down here." Officer Jockle froze, and so did Joseph. One of the men got up from the table with a scowl on his face. He was a big man with a big nose and dark, heavy eyebrows. Joseph knew that face from somewhere. Had he been their waiter at dinner? Had he set up their beds one night? No. He was the man that was in the balcony the morning of the Shabbos service, the man who had pounded his hand on the railing when they had taken down the portrait of Hitler. The man staggered a little, bumping into things as he tried to move through the tight little room. "The captain has given his children special permission to visit the engine room, Scheinlich," Petty Officer Jockle told him. "The captain," Scheinlich said, his voice dripping with disapproval. "Yes," Jockle said, "the captain." "Jewish rats," Scheinlich said, sneering at Joseph and the other kids. Many of them looked down at their shoes, and even Joseph looked away, trying not to draw the big man's attention. But Joseph clenched his fist, and his ears burned hot with frustration and embarrassment. After a few tense moments, Scheinlich went back to his seat, the threat of the captain's rank still worth something even so far away from the bridge. Petty Officer Jockle hurried the children along, and Scheinlich and his friends broke into another song even louder than before. Petty Officer Jockle ushered them down another flight of stairs. Joseph's legs felt weak, and he clung to the railing. He thought that they had escaped all this racism and hatred on the St. Louis, but it had followed them here, even to the middle of the ocean. With its huge diesel engines and generators and dials and pumps and switches, the engine room should have been fascinating, but Joseph had a hard time getting excited about it. None of the other children were excited either, not after what had happened with Scheinlich. The tour ended, and Petty Officer Jockle returned them to the surface, being careful to take them back a different route. It was a different world below the decks, Joseph thought. A world outside the magic little bubble he and the other Jewish people lived in above the decks on the MS St. Louis. Here, below the decks, was the real world. And that's where we'll leave Joseph for today.